Hi, my name is William Schaeffer, and this is an amazing true story, the story of Bigfoot, the song Bigfoot. Now, most of you are absolutely unfamiliar with it, but Bigfoot is a song that I wrote and recorded around 1980, 79, and won the Roland Synthesizer tape competition in 1980 when I sent them a cassette. And you can hear the song on this YouTube channel and on iTunes, Bigfoot, The Return of Bigfoot. So this will largely be about how it came to be and what it meant for me. Many of you that worked on PLATO all those years ago were familiar with it because it became the kind of music project demonstration song for a couple of years. In the late 1970s, I became involved with the PLATO computer system, specifically the PLATO computer music project that was run by Sherwin Gooch. I was a student at the University of Illinois, and Sherwin Gooch had built a 4-voice square wave synthesizer, the G.S.W box, or Gooch Synthetic Woodwind, that was controlled by the PLATO system. And the PLATO system was unique because it was a multi-user system that had a graphic interface of 512 by 512 resolution. Now this was unique because all computer science at that time was verbal instructions, and you would have a stack of cards, or you would be at a terminal and you would be typing in your little verbal instructions. But PLATO was graphic, and it presaged computing in the future in that regard. The mouse had not yet been invented. There was no mouse. We used arrow keys to move around. Now, a third party introduced me to Sherwin and the music project, and I started writing music for the G.S.W, the Gooch Synthetic Woodwind. And Lippold Haken was a university student at this time and already writing software for the system. After a few months and a few compositions, I was invited upstairs to the music lab on the 5th floor, which was really a shed that was just built on the roof of the building. And up there they had the Gooch Cybernetic synthesizer, and this was a 16-voice programmable waveform digital synthesizer. Each waveform had a resolution of 256 by 256. And each of the 16 channels in the synthesizer box itself was a card. Boom, boom, boom. There was a card rack with 16 printed circuit cards and then a few main system controller cards. And that was the G.C.S. So I started writing music for that, and they had music software that was continually being worked on. This was very exciting for me because I love music, and I still do, for no real rational reason. And I started goofing around and writing music. Now, in the interim, I had dropped out of college for a year and then come back to college. Engineering school was very difficult and not very interesting at all. The only thing I really liked about engineering school was working on the PLATO computer system and working on the PLATO music. Well, sometime in the spring of one year back there, 78 I suppose, I wrote a bass line. And this was an interesting concept for me. I play boogie woogie piano, and that has an alternating, arpeggiating bass line that gives you this da-da-da-da-da-da feeling as you play from the little finger to the thumb like that. But I thought, what if we separated those two bass lines, and I wrote a bass line that you played with your right and left hand? And that is the bass line that is in Bigfoot. And I would play this on the piano, and it was a lot of fun and really exciting just to play that bass line. And I played that for a few months. I remember one time when I was in Wheaton, we went back to visit Chet Balzer at the Wheaton Central High School band room. Now, when I was in high school band, I was friends with a fellow, Mark Tuomanoksa, and he was a musical, well, he was very talented musically. You might say a musical genius. And he had a great ear, and it was very inspiring for me to be challenged by someone who was so talented when I felt like I struggled a great deal. And Mark was a great guy, and he was very excited about music and playing music, and he had a lot of talent and ability. When we were in high school, we were in the band. And in a lot of ways, the band saved my life. It was the only opportunity I had to meet students that were in other grades. It was fun. It was challenging. And we got to play music, and I played the saxophone. And the band room became a place you could kind of go and hang out, because you would have to go to band lessons or whatever. And the band became kind of a social community for everyone that had no social group. So I really enjoyed being in band in high school, maybe because I didn't know any better. But in college, I would occasionally go back to say hi to Chet Balzer, the band director, just because I missed being in high school band. I was in band in college for a year, but that was too much, and engineering school was too difficult, and it wasn't the same esprit de corps, really the same feeling, and I wasn't the same person. I believe the music programs are now all disbanded in the Wheaton school system. And it's too bad, because these are perhaps the only important part of a school, being part of a team and developing relationships with your team members. But while I went back to visit, I played that bass line. And I have a memory of Mark jamming on saxophone, which is ridiculous, but he might have jammed on that upper part of the piano. But I played that bass line for Mark. Well, I went back to U of I, and after a while I thought, maybe I should use this as a new PLATO music composition. And this was a big step for me. This was big. The entire composition I wrote in macros. And instead of writing as one continuous stream, each section of the music I wrote as a macro so I could arrange it more easily. And for those of you unfamiliar with computer science terms, you'll just have to learn what a macro is on your own. So I programmed the bass line, and the bass instrument I found and was unchanged through all the evolutions of the song Bigfoot, which is kind of funny. It was just like one of these, kind of a truncated sine wave of some sort. And I programmed a bass line. And I still think this is a neat idea, having two bass lines. And I think having two bass lines is what gives Bigfoot its unique character and energy or motivation. So I finished the bass line, and I added a click of a drum track. And the click is just a burst of noise, of white noise, with almost no envelope or anything at all. Very simple. This was a long time ago, and computing was much more primitive. And I was very hasty, and I kind of like it. It worked out fine. Then I thought, since we're on a computer, why don't I write a keyboard line that's impossible to play, that's just too fast, that you really couldn't play, and would have strange intervals you couldn't play. So I wrote out the keyboard line on music paper pretty fast. I just wrote it out. In retrospect, I find and I hear things that I would have changed slightly and would have done differently. But for that piece, I just plugged it in, and it was kind of fun. Now, I used an arrangement style of like a pyramid, or adding information. And the first time through, we slowly build up the bass line. And the second time through, we hear the whole bass line with the drum hit. The third time through, we add the fast keyboard line. So we're building energy. Now the fourth time through, I added a melody line. And this is basically just kind of a ramp wave trumpet. In the first preliminary melody I added was kind of lackluster. And I remember playing it for Steve Peltz, who was a systems programmer there and I think is still involved in PLATO. And his comment was, it's not very interesting, is it? Something like that. And I had to admit he was right. So I went back to the drawing board, I threw out that melody line, and I started and arrived at what we have now, where I have the trumpet that goes da-da-da, and then you have, I took a white noise and just put a descending pitch and just goes, and it was the coolest, biggest sound. And on the G.C.S, it sounded much better than on the IMS, because the G.C.S was only 8-bit, and it was dirty. And the dirtiness in the noise sounded better. The G.C.S was noisy, but those were the A to D converter, or the D to A converters and all that type of stuff. But the G.C.S was real. So now I had a melody line, and I was pretty happy with it. And incidentally, at one point, I just threw in 5 against 4. When it goes to the fourth, the melody line is 5 against 4, and I really liked the sound of it. In retrospect, I learned to play 5 against 4 on the piano in blues and jazz by listening to that program 5 against 4 in Bigfoot that I put there on a whim that really sounded pretty good. So now I had the melody line complete. What to do? Where to go from there? You know, just play it over and over again. That's kind of boring. So I put the bridge in there where the noise comes down, and I sculpted the white noise around and slowly built it all back up again and played it through one time and just ended it, boom, like that. And it turned out pretty good. And on the G.C.S, no one heard anything like it. It was very dynamic. Now, right around that time, and I believe this was in the winter, spring of 1980, a fellow named Theo Gray, who was Steve Gray's younger brother, who now has some educational internet consulting firms, making a lot of money, very successful. But he was kind of a quiet, studious guy, and he built a mixer. The G.C.S was monophonic, and he actually bought the parts and built and designed a mixer where each of those cards for each of those channels, or in the G.C.S, you could plug it into this mixer and do volume and pan, and then plug it back into the mixer on the G.C.S that combined them all and made the signal. And now we had a stereo G.C.S. It was difficult to hook up, and it was not regularly in the line there. Around this time also, the PLATO system started getting a lot of tours from around the country. People were interested in what was going on. And Roland had sent a tour. They were interested in the music and the music project and all that kind of thing. Now, this was before MIDI, and this was before a lot of the things we take for granted. This was before you could easily do digital recording even. There were no consumer digital recording products available. You could not, as a consumer, get a digital recorder. So anyway, we got a letter in the late spring that Roland was having a synthesizer competition. The project did, the music project, and invited composers to send an entry to this competition. Now, I was an undergraduate student and working for minimum wage. I was working for minimum wage 20 hours a week, and that's what I was living on. And I was living with my girlfriend, and she was working minimum wage at a fast food restaurant, and no one was helping us out. Thanks, Mom and Dad. No one was helping us out. It was extremely difficult just to survive. I mean, we had a nice apartment, so it wasn't like we were living in a tent in the breezeway. Now, but I only had $6, and we recorded everything on cassette, and I had just enough money to buy 2 Maxell Gold cassettes, and those were the best cassette. There was a big debate in those days between TDK and Maxell, and TDK was a little brighter but not as durable, and Maxell was the tape of choice. So I went to the music project with my 2 cassettes, and I was broke. And you think this is funny, you think I'm just joking around, you don't get it. So the first cassette, and I think I used my own cassette recorder also. In no way was I really helped or assisted at all by the PLATO system or the PLATO music project in anything I did musically, except they just said, yeah, you can sit here and you can make some music. Everything else I did on my own with my own meager resources. So the first tape, I set the levels on this mixer while it was going, and I got them set. Then I took it out, and the second tape I put in and recorded the song. Now in cassette transfers, there was a 5 dB signal to noise loss in every generation. In retrospect, this was designed by the manufacturers so you couldn't use cassettes to compete with more expensive recording machinery. And they purposely degraded the circuitry to make the signal more degraded in successive generations. These are the fruits of capitalism. But I took this one cassette that I recorded directly off in the machine, and I put it in an envelope with an entry form and sent it to Roland, because I knew that fidelity was important. And I totally forgot about it. Life is busy, we're doing a bunch of stuff. Well, about 2 or 3 months later, 2 months later, I get a letter saying I won the Roland 4th annual synthesizer tape competition in Group C, which was non-professionals. And that my award would be 50,000 yen, in value of 50,000 yen. I thought, oh my God. Well, now the exchange rate was about 1,000 yen or 100 yen to the dollar, or 200 yen to the dollar, so it wasn't that great. But still, it was very nice. And they made good. They shipped me an electronic piano keyboard that I used a lot, and a delay machine that I still have, and a Strobe tuner that I still have. And the keyboard and the delay machine were instrumental in me developing the next stage of my sound. And I used that delay machine on minimal music, which I think is one of the most interesting music compositions I did, art creations I did. So now Bigfoot was an award winner, and it was on the PLATO system, and people would come in up to the music lab and they would play Bigfoot. And it was the first time I got any real public recognition for being a musician of any sort at all. My parents did not want me to study music. They forbade me from studying music and would not pay for it. They did not encourage my music playing because, to a large degree, when I was learning to play piano, I really wasn't that good. I was learning. So that was pretty cool. However, one funny note is just days after I recorded Bigfoot using Teo Gray's mixer, something happened and the mixer got burned out. Someone put too strong a signal in one of the channels. It totally burned out the circuitry, and it was ruined forever. He never rebuilt it, and there never was a stereo mixer for the G.C.S, and no G.C.S music was ever stereo until the IMS that was designed by Lippold Haken was introduced a few years later. So that's pretty much the story of Bigfoot. And it was a life-changing event for me that gave me validation as an artist, a musician, and a composer. I wish that rate of validation had continued, but it's been a long and interesting journey. And it's very difficult to believe that it's been almost 40 years, 4 decades, since I first started composing Bigfoot. And it really took me 9 months to compose that stupid little 3-minute song. And I typed in all the source code by hand. Was no playing on the keyboard. Each note was a string of alphanumeric characters that I typed into a macro and then made an arrangement of the macros to arrange the whole song. Now, when the G.C.S was replaced by the IMS, a tragedy struck. And the IMS was not upwardly compatible with the G.C.S. Remarkable. In a computer facility, in a computer school, when they taught upward compatibility, it was not. All the music code had to be recompiled, and all the instruments sounded different. All the instruments had to be redesigned. Now, at this time, I had probably written maybe 30 or so songs for the G.C.S. And it took me 6 months. And I redesigned all the instrument files so they sound as close as possible on the IMS to the way they sounded on the G.C.S. as a way to preserve the music, to preserve my effort. And this is largely what you hear on the CDs that are available today. I have 3 CDs of PLATO computer music that are available on CD Baby. You can download them or buy them, or you can listen to them on this YouTube channel. The first one is the first one is like 77 to 81, and that is old recordings of the G.C.S. The second 2, it's like 82 to 85, and then PLATO Computer Music 1986. Those were both recorded on the IMS. Now there's a lot of technical differences between the two systems, to a large degree because technology evolved very quickly. And I was happy that I was able to make reasonable facsimiles of all the music and redesign all the instrument files so they sounded reasonably like they did when I first conceived them. And that took about 6 months for me to do that. And I left all those in the files and made the recordings. But the shining moment of my involvement with the PLATO Music Project was Bigfoot. And that was just a breakthrough for me, and a breakthrough for the entire music project. It was because of the award Bigfoot that Don Bitzer and all the top brass at PLATO thought they might be onto something, and it would be worth investing more money in the music project. This is how Lippold got more grants for more of his ideas. This is why they hired more people, and the staff at the music project increased by 3-fold from before. And this was largely due just to the notoriety and success of Bigfoot. Now, At no time after I wrote Bigfoot did anyone ask me what they thought a music system should be, what it should incorporate, or was I involved in the design of the interactive system. I had no input at all except just in a notes file identifying obvious errors and making comments like that. Nevertheless, it was a great time. We went on to put on some concerts in the music building, and that's a whole nother story how that happened. But it's all largely due just to Bigfoot. And without a song like Bigfoot, uh, everyone I know likes that song, no matter what type of music they prefer. And that's kind of remarkable. They all come around to liking that song. And it was a big selling point for the PLATO system and the PLATO Computer Music Project. Because when they would take a tour through the whole system in the machine room, they'd always end up in the music project and listen to Bigfoot. And that would be the emotional cap to their exciting high-tech tour 40 years ago. Since that time, the PLATO system no longer exists. And that is a tragedy. And I feel sorry for all of you that are just in internet land and didn't experience the interactivity of a multi-user system like PLATO. I was very lucky, and I'm kind of sad that it's gone. But that's the story of Bigfoot. What an amazing story, what an amazing song. And the cassette, now you can hear online Bigfoot, the cassette that I used as a test cassette and did not mail away. I did not play at all for 25 or 30 years. And when I made that soundtrack, I converted it for the first time. And in the sections where I was adjusting the levels, I copied, cut and paste another piece of the song so it sounds as close to the winning Bigfoot copy as possible. But I do not have a copy of the tape of Bigfoot that won the competition because I sent the master tape to Roland because I wanted the best fidelity possible, and I was right. Bigfoot, 1980, winner of the Roland Synthesizer tape competition. Listen to it now and listen to it a second time. Thanks, and leave your comments below. And it's too bad because music and art and athletics are perhaps the only really important part of school, being a part of a team and developing relationships and friendships.